Welcome back to season two. I just got done filming with Randy Hill of High Risk Fitness, which is this episode. And before you run, maybe from this typical kind of episode niche of like shooting and combatives and stuff, I want you to stop and pause and think about how none of that would matter without defense of self, right? In addition to self defense, taking care of our bodies, seeing them as a whole picture between being functionally capable, physically capable, all the way to are we eating enough to fuel that, to our hormonal balance, to our recovery, and how that applies even to things like combatives and competitive shooting. That's everything that is housed in this episode. So if that interests you, stick around. Randy is an incredibly impressive individual, not because of just his fitness level and the fact that he is an incredible fitness coach, but because of how he approaches fitness and his clients as a whole. This episode isn't to turn you into clients for him. It's just to give you an idea of, what is a good picture of defense of self and how can we kind of approach it from this holistic lens. For those of you that do not know, this will also be housed on YouTube, the video form, if you want to go and watch it instead. But before you go, please take a moment, or if you're sticking around even, to rate the podcast. That is how we get, put on the map, guys. That's how people find us. That would really help out a lot. And for those of you that haven't heard, last little tidbit here, I started a concealment community Facebook group. It will be linked in the show notes. This is where I want to connect with you all a lot more closely, help you with your individual kind of concealed carry journey or self-defense journey, host some weekly live streams, and just, yeah, like I said, make myself more accessible. So I hope to see you over there, but don't leave just yet. Check out this episode with Randy Hill of High Risk Fitness. But yeah, I'm glad we connected on Instagram. I found you through the reel that was like, send this to someone you want to take to the range or kiss, but don't tell them which one. That's the reel, right? That's what we were DMing
I
about.
think so. Yeah, that one did pretty decent.
Yeah, it did. It was hilarious. I saw a few other people do it for like the gym, like a girl's working out in the gym and she'd be like, send this to someone you want to lift with or kiss on the lips, but don't tell which one. Um, I didn't know that people were gonna send that reel back to me when I did it. Did you get a bunch of people that sent it back to you?
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh my God. When I did that, I was like, duh, of course that's gonna happen. Like I didn't think through that. So yeah.
Yeah,
I
all
don't know how
guys
you
in my
felt about
case.
that. All guys in my case.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, I'd imagine
Unfortunately.
and that's maybe something we can touch on too, like being a woman in a male dominated industry. Like I'm sure you talk about that on every podcast or so.
I actually don't dive into it much. I think I'm lucky enough to, at this point, I feel like my content truly attracts the audience I try to attract. Like, I feel like I dress pretty modestly and like I still show femininity, but I don't show too much. Like, over time, I've become a bit more modest. So I feel like I've attracted the audience I've wanted as a result, but you always get like absolutely creepy stuff. My boyfriend and I love to go through my DMs. It is like one of our favorite things to do
I
together.
I could imagine there's a lot of weirdos out there.
Yes. Absolutely. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of tell listeners that's actually how we kind of connected on that reel. Um, I'd love for you, Randy, to go ahead and introduce yourself to those that don't know you already.
Yeah, so my name's Randy. I run a company called High Risk Fitness. I've been a strength coach for the last 16 years, working with everybody from professional athletes to SWAT cops and special forces operators, and honestly, just a lot of like dads and guys and women that just want to be better protectors of their families. And so essentially what I do is just kind of like a high level fitness coaching sort of thing where I help people achieve whatever their goal happens to be, given whatever, time and whatever other constraints that person may have. And yeah, that's essentially what I do in a nutshell, 12 hours a day, every day.
Absolutely. And you train both men and women, right?
Yeah, yeah, both men and women. And it's obviously, geared towards more performance oriented kind of stuff. So obviously there's a little bit of a, physique component there because everyone wants to look the way they want to look. But
Right.
generally the gist of it is, people who are into concealed carry and self-defense and protecting their families. And so a lot of it is about, being stronger, being more agile, resistant to injury, having better conditioning and those sorts of things for practical applications.
I love that you said that so much. I feel like there's this, and maybe maybe this doesn't apply to everyone, but I feel like there's this kind of perception on fitness coaches that they're just there to make you look better. And I think it might be because social media shows you the aesthetic side first. That's how you get someone's attention. And then it takes looking into that coach and looking into their kind of philosophy to understand that they may be there to help you do more than just look good, to actually be more functional, to have longevity and not injure themselves or yourself as much. So I really love that you went into that. Um, I know we just talked about you potentially wanting to rebrand like just to your name, but with high risk fitness, what was your kind of thought in making that your brand name originally?
Yeah, so I mean, at the time, the majority of my clients, and even still now, are police officers, a lot of SWAT cops, especially. And so, the kind of the phrase like serving a high risk warrant, or just the fact that their job is high risk, it just kind of made sense when I was kind of coming up with a brand name. And then we ended up coming with
Yeah,
like a pretty cool logo for it as well. And I liked it and kind of rolled with it.
absolutely.
And that's just sort of what it morphed into. And then, as I kind of expanded my horizons into different populations, I just kind of stuck with the name, and it works. So
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's really good to know, and that speaks so much like the functional side of things. Like when you think of a at least when I think of a SWAT cop, I think of someone who has to be like powerfully strong, like be able to exhibit like powerful movements if we're kind of um looking at like a metric of strength or something. Not someone who's like depleting their intake to step onto stage, right? Like that's kind of what that
exactly.
makes me think of. So it's really cool. I really like the name. It stood out to me personally. So that's very, very cool. And I think having a coach is one of the most incredible things you can do. I have my master's in exercise science, and I will be the first person to tell you that that does not mean I know everything about fitness, about nutrition, and just health. I have a coach because I believe in hiring someone who knows more than I know, who spends their life researching and finding solutions for people on an individual basis. So I'm excited to ask you about like your like philosophy around coaching and how you approach clients, and also just talk about health because that is the first line, in my opinion, and what I preach on the podcast to self defense. It sounds like you carry that same kind of belief,
Yeah,
maybe,
no,
and value.
absolutely. I
Would you
mean,
say?
I have an assistant coach that programs all my training and nutrition for me for that exact same reason. And hey, maybe it's not necessarily like that they have more knowledge or something, but it's just that having an objective third party with kind of that bird's eye view can do a lot for you, because we're always stuck in our own head and we have our own biases, and so having an external source of accountability can be huge. And then also just having somebody else that can sort of see what you can't see because you're so used to doing what you do every day.
Absolutely. Before we kind of dive into more nuanced questions I have for you, I'd love to know your shooting background and just, yeah, where that started for you, where it kind of coincided with training, maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, just like a lot of people, I kind of like grew up shooting just sort of casually, and I was always interested in that sort of thing. And then when I was 18, I joined the Marine Corps, and so obviously there's shooting involved with that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, but when I got out, I started to get into concealed carry and just kind of caring for personal protection and those sorts of things. Wasn't really like super skilled or in a competition or anything like that. And then I just started to get a little bit more into it. I started to, get some clients that were into competitive shooting. And then at some point, I started coaching a guy named Aaron Clark who works at Tier 1 Concealed. And, obviously he's, into shooting and competing in tactical games and USPSA and that kind of stuff. And by virtue of that, then I started working there. And that's when I like really got super deep into, training correctly and taking classes and that kind of stuff. So that's really my background. It wasn't like anything where I was, a professional or anything like that. It was more just, as somebody who wanted to be prepared and be able to defend myself and my family.
That's fantastic. I find that I don't wanna say there's an imbalance, right? That's to say there's a certain proper standard, I guess, out there, which there really isn't one, but I find that there's an imbalance on at least both sides of, like, the competitive shooter or the concealed carry practitioner who isn't maybe physically healthy, and then on the other side of that, the person who's very into fitness and very strong, and then has this idea or perception that they can be more of a protector than they maybe can be without any proper training or tools, right? Um, Where would you say, just personally, like, kind of from your past and training people and looking around, where would you say that balance is? If you were to set a standard for where fitness should be in someone's life and then training with a firearm, maybe even some hand-to-hand grappling, where does that land for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're sort of synergistic, right? I mean, you can't really like employ a weapon correctly and right if you're not physically fit, and then on the other hand, you could be really physically fit and absolutely have no self-defense skills. And so the way that I kind of look at really anything in life is almost like almost like I'm an RPG character in a video game and I have like all my stats that I want to level up, right? And so and
Nice.
so my idea is like I want to level up all my stats. So yeah, maybe like my physical stat with fitness and my shooting ability and whatever, like my relationships and spirituality and finances and all that kind of stuff. And so you just kind of have to figure out like where that balance is for you. But yeah, I do think that there are a lot of people that they think that because they carry a firearm that they're good and they're protected, right? But they have to realize that not every situation is going to be a situation in which it would be right to employ a firearm. And then vice versa. There are people who are like, well, I train martial arts, so I don't need to carry a gun. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter how good you are at martial arts, like you're not going to deflect bullets. So I think that if you are kind of like in one of those extremes, in one of those camps, that you're leaving things on the table, just like most subjects, there's a lot of nuance to it. So, you can't really have one without the other.
Absolutely. So do you find that when people come to you for guidance, are they usually in that place of realizing they are ready to take that next step? Like maybe something happened or they just took a good look at their stats. Um, is that usually the case, or do you feel like you kind of have to put things in perspective for them?
No, I mean, usually people, when they seek me out, either they are wanting to take their fitness to the next level, like they already training, they're just kind of like plateaued and they just want to like kind of improve, like level up those stats, like I was talking about, or they are somebody who is sort of, let things slip and they realize that like they are not fulfilling the role as a protector to the extent that they should be. And so they've kind of, come to that realization like, okay, I really need to like make this thing happen. And a lot of people, they spend time trying to do this stuff on their own and kind of motivate themselves and they have like a New Year's resolution or they'll, download some program or something like that and they'll do it for a period of time and then stop. And then they sort of realize like, okay, like I need like an external source of accountability here to really sort of, burn the ships and like force me to do the thing or accomplish the thing that I want to accomplish. Because when we're younger, it's like we have our parents, we have coaches, like they kind of force us to do stuff. But then as we get older, it's really on us. And so sometimes we have to sort of artificially create that situation if we're serious about making something happen. And we like recognize the fact that we are, flawed humans who are going to like sometimes take the easy road if nobody else is forcing us not to.
Yes, I love that. And I love that, you're obviously where you're at with fitness, which is very impressive. And then you also have this person writing you said they write out your macros and your nutrition plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. And does that give you accountability
Yeah,
as a
absolutely.
result?
So my assistant coach programs all of my training and nutrition, and I do check-ins with them just like our clients do, because,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty disciplined with, going to the gym because I love to go to the gym, but I also have
Right.
my flaws where I will like, kind of like see something cool on Instagram I want to try and like derail my program, or, with me, I get really busy with work and I'll skip meals. And so having somebody else like a teammate and just knowing that, hey, if I don't do this thing, there's somebody on the other end that's expecting it of me, that they're going to have something to say about it. So just that little bit of like implied social pressure can really go a long way. And it's very much
Yes.
the same way like with shooting. So, when I go out and I train, if I don't have a training partner to shoot with who's like relatively at the same skill level as me, I won't really push myself as hard. So I really do, need somebody else that's kind of like relying on me to push myself to the best of my ability. And I think that people in really any field who are the most successful understand that. And so they have some kind of mentor, whether that's for business or sports, yeah, or shooting or fitness, just having somebody else there on that other end. I mean, even the best pitcher in the MLB has a throwing coach, right? So you can always make use of somebody else's second opinion.
I think that's lovely. That's a great way to share that you personally do that. So thanks for being vulnerable and and sharing that. That's always good to know. Yeah, accountability is wonderful. I something I laughed earlier when you said you see something on Instagram you want to try. That has been my biggest issue lately with my coach. She told me in the kindest way. She was like, "All right, so let me get this straight. You want to do tactical games. You want to grow an ass. You want to run a marathon with Lena late this year. You so like those 2, obviously, hilarious. She was like, "So and you're preparing for the Shotgun World shoot and you wanna lift every single day and do jujitsu 3 times a week?" And I was like, "Yep, yep, yep, that's about it." And she was like, "Cool, cool, 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 cool. This is probably not going to work." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Lay it on me." I think accountability with someone, it's not just about, like, having someone keep you to your goals, but it's also about having someone that a realistic timeline and, like, give you perspective on, what your goals should be. There's no, like, more disappointing feeling than not reaching a goal you set, not because you couldn't reach it, but because maybe it was unrealistic. You weren't eating enough to gain that muscle you needed to gain to grow that butt, or you, you had almost a goal saturation. For those listening that maybe are kind of like widespread like me and like to put 1,000 goals on their coach, what would you recommend to take like an audit to really think about what their goals might be?
Yeah, well,
If that
what's
makes
interesting
sense.
is sort of to contrast that, one of the issues that I tend to run into are people who do want to be stronger and, physically larger, and they also want to be faster and they also want to be leaner. And I think that there is kind of like this idea that you can really only pursue one of those things at a time. But the reason that I think that people believe that is because we sort of have these like cultural stereotypes that you can either be like, in my case, mostly training men, that you can either be like the big, strong guy who's also slow, or you could be really fast, but then you have to be like skinny and weak. Well, in my opinion
Right.
and in my experience, you really can develop like maybe 90% of your capacity for both of those things. It's just that when you really want to specialize in something, that you really have to go all in and take things like to an extreme. The issue that I seem to run into, or that clients that come to me run into, is that they are just like spamming stuff and they're not really tracking anything. And it makes it very difficult to progress at all of those things at once if they aren't really like applying a specific tool to make those things happen. So essentially, what I'm getting at here is, and this is kind of how I brief everybody, is that your body is a machine that adapts to stress. That is like the most important training concept, in my opinion. And so when you train, you have to give your body a novel stress to adapt to for it to make you faster, or for it to make you stronger, or to make that muscle larger. And so a lot of people that go to the gym and lift weights will have like a lifting program where it's very clear the lifts, the reps, the sets, the weights. But then when it comes to, getting faster, they just do cardio and they're not really applying a specific tool to that. And then to contrast that, there are people who have a very focused running program, but then with their weightlifting, they just go to the gym and kind of just like go based on vibes and just kind of do whatever they feel like. Well, if
Vibes.
you
Sorry.
what's that?
Sorry. The vibes thing,
Yeah,
I totally
right. Like
relate
a
to
lot of
that.
people. So most people's idea of if they got a good workout in is like how sore they are, or how the pump is, or if they went to failure. Whereas my idea is like, okay, we have to like objectively get better on paper, right? So you have to like lift more, one more rep or 5 more pounds. And then when it's a run, you have to do it 10 seconds faster, or with a shorter rest period, or you have to go further. Well, if we're applying like a really specific tool to make those things happen, and we're really focused, we can accomplish most of those things at one time. But it just comes down to efficiency and again, tracking what we're doing to make sure that every time we train, we're improving. And this is the difference between what I call working out, which is what most people do in the gym, like exercising, versus training, which is like a more intentional, structured process that allows us then to accomplish both of those things. Sorry, that
Okay.
was a lot.
No, don't be sorry. I'm just having this moment. Okay, so this happens every single podcast episode. There'll be a guest speaker. Obviously, you all have a subject matter. You guys are subject matter experts. And like it's so hard when I'm sitting here to not apply it to myself and go into this deep reflection. And I have to cause myself, I have to pull myself out of that and be like, not right now. This is
Well,
how
it
your
might
time.
it might be good because I mean I'm sure a lot of your
It is.
listeners are kind of in the same boat, so it might be helpful to them
Yes.
because it's relatable.
Absolutely. Okay, yes. So I go through those 2 things in my head. I always try to make sure it at least, it's not a ramble and it'll help someone, but my brain just did that thing where I was like, "Holy shit," right? Um, Gosh, I love that so much. I think that, I got exposed to fitness, majoritively when, we started to see that, like, influx of influencers on social media. It almost became, like, super saturated. My page actually started as a fitness page, Fit for Fia, because Fit Fia was taken. So, now I tell people that it's what fits for me, speaking of wanting to go back and change it to just
Yeah,
your
well, it's
name,
it's a
um
versatile word, so.
isn't it? Thank God. But with that said, I was kind of exposed to like all the gym girlies and the matching sets going and doing workouts and then only ever showing, their glute gains or like even their quad gains or like how visible their abs were. And like there was never this talk about like what is truly their goal. And because it's social media and because their engagement would increase with like showing of their body, I kind of always took that as like, okay, the goal is always aesthetics. And I led with aesthetics. And um it's taken years, like even to this day, to think more broadly and to think about wanting to be just functionally trained, like truly be capable in every area. There's nothing more uncomfortable than going for a run and having to stop before you're even a mile in because you're cramping on a side. Like, how embarrassing for myself. I'm not talking about other people, but like, I hate that feeling. I'm like, no, I want to be able to run a half marathon, but I also want to be strong as hell. And I want to do, you know, more than 15 push-ups without fatiguing, and I wanna be able to do a full pull-up. I can't yet, I don't wanna talk about it, but, um, it's difficult sometimes when, society tells you one thing, but your body's kinda telling you another. It's kinda strange. So, when you speak to new clients that come in and maybe kind of hit you with all of their goals, like, say you had a me as a client, and I came in and I gave you all these goals, how would you kind of direct me to a specific and measurable goal to start out with?
Well, first of all, I would charge you double because you have so many, you're gonna be a
That's
pain.
hilarious. Don't you dare.
No, I mean, I would just try
I'm
to,
just
I guess, try to figure out like really what you want out of fitness, right? Because everybody comes to me and they tell me, "Hey, I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to gain 20 pounds of muscle, or something like that, or whatever." Maybe there is a performance metric there right off the bat. But what I try to get a little bit more granular and deep on is like, well, what is like the real goal that you want? Like, what is the real outcome you want? Because like if a guy comes to me, for instance, and says, "Well, I want to gain 20 pounds of muscle," I really need to know like why. Why do you need to gain 20 pounds of muscle? And sometimes people don't really think about that until I kind of make them think about it. I'm like, well, how would that improve your life? And that's going to help us
yeah.
determine like what the training really needs to look like. Because, again, like if you somebody who is, let's say 20 pounds overweight and you're like, well, I want to lose 20 pounds, what's really going to motivate us is kind of imagining that end state and diving deeper into like what the real motivation behind that is. And a lot of the times it's confidence, right? Like somebody wants to feel good taking their shirt off at the pool, or they want to just whatever. Like maybe they're a lot of times there is an aesthetic goal, but the performance goal facilitates that.
Right.
So I think that it's important to really figure out what that long term goal is. And if it is to accomplish these things, like be able to run a half marathon, but also look good and lift and stuff like that, it's not that it's a problem. It's just that maybe we'll have to like, bias towards one of those things when it's like proximal and it's coming up. And then we can kind of, periodize the training. So for instance, I have a client like that named Kyle, who he wanted to lose a lot of body
Sorry.
fat. It's
Yeah.
very common. So he wanted to. He's a fireman, so there's a physical aspect there to his job, but he wanted to get really lean because he had maybe 30 pounds of fat to lose. Well, he also wanted to get as strong as possible, which a lot of people think are conflicting goals, and he also wanted to run a half marathon. And we were able to accomplish all of those things. So
Fantastic
yeah,
for
in a
Kyle.
quick
That's
quick period
awesome.
of time. So we took his bench press from 250 pounds to 315 pounds, while he went from 220 to 170 pounds body weight, and he did accomplish that
Incredible.
half marathon. Now,
Wait, 220 to 170?
yeah, I think it was, yeah,
Wait,
so I guess it was more than 30 pounds, but it was quite a lot of fat he had to lose.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine. So as like, let's say, his marathon was coming up, we just kind of like put more of our chips in the hat of training for that marathon and put some of the lifting more in a maintenance mode. And then after the marathon was over, we focused a little bit more on the strength increases and put the conditioning on a maintenance mode. But in general, the idea is that we're moving forward towards all these things at once, and we're just kind of like, switching the lever as time
Mm-hmm.
goes on.
That's fantastic. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. You're really kind of challenging that idea in my mind as well. And this is not to say my coach doesn't tell me that we can do that. She just knows she knows me and I get all these ideas and I want to do all the things and then I usually crash out in the middle of it all and then end up like either sick. And I have my own things like I struggle with Hashimoto's, an autoimmune disease, so that very much has limited me before outside of the realm of just like what I'm eating and how much I'm lifting. That's been a big struggle of mine, and she happens to be a hormonal specialist, so, like, thank God, she's able to have insight on that. So it's not to say she hasn't supported all my goals because she's kind of had to, right? But, I still get to where I feel like I have to almost get down to 1. So it's nice to hear that there's a way to balance it, and yeah, having someone to help you find that balance in a reasonable way, it's just that's incredible.
Well,
And how
I
much
think
time was this? Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that a lot of a
Yeah.
coach's job too is to keep their clients on track. And because a lot of people do have a tendency to kind of like switch their goals, every couple months. And a lot of the times that's the reason they never really accomplish any of them. So
Yes.
sometimes I do have to kind of like give people a little bit of a reality check and say like, hey, let's finish doing what we're doing right now. Like chill out a little bit and then we'll focus on that thing.
Yeah.
And again, like that's part of the accountability aspect of it is preventing you from programming goal hopping.
Oh, goal hopping. There's a name for it. Oh no. Jesus. Okay. Well, man, am I a goal hopper? I hate that. I don't want to be a goal hopper. No. Actually right now we had a really great kind of like hour-long session. You know those ones where you're like, okay, we really need to talk. And I've reestablished I actually withdrew from my half marathon recently because I just realized I needed to kind of niche down to something and give myself actual time to focus on it because I am a goal hopper and I wasn't willing to give up jujitsu. I wasn't willing to give up the shotgun world shoot. I was kind of like, you know what? I think taking at least the running 3 to 4 times a week out of my schedule would help my body recover with the Hashimoto's. So that was actually a really big life improvement thing of mine, even though it included quitting something, which obviously gave me like a visceral reaction to do. It was good for me to kind of be more honest with myself and the time that I have to like accomplish these other goals. And then I think, 2027, once I get my thyroid antibodies down, it might be a year to readdress marathon running and in long form and more like high intensity things. But yeah, it's nice to hear how you personally approach this. And kind of like speaking of hormones and what happens, on a more systemic level, how do you approach things like that with clients who maybe have low testosterone and are struggling in a more systemic way?
Yeah, well, so everything is holistic, right? It just depends on what the individual needs. And so
Right.
with my clients, like if we determine that that's something that we need to look into, then we will. And that's something that I'll kind of guide them on. So if it's like, hey, maybe we need to take a look at your blood work, well, we can get some labs done and I'll help them kind of interpret it. And I'm not a physician, but I am somebody that has a lot of experience with that stuff. And so I can at least interpret things for them and tell them like sort of what I would do in that situation and arm them with some knowledge so they don't feel very confused if they go to a doctor or a clinic. And I mean, testosterone's a subject I could talk about, for hours because there's so much misunderstanding and mishandling of patients in that realm. And so anytime a client asks me a question about that, I always make sure that we go through things very methodically because I do see, honestly, in like 80% of cases when somebody just goes to their general practitioner and asks them about testosterone, it's not, in my opinion, handled correctly. And I've seen some people get either really bad advice or put on a protocol that makes them worse. And so, yeah, we kind of just cross that bridge when we come to it with each individual.
Absolutely. And since you have so much experience with testosterone specifically with your clients, what are some signs of low T? I feel like I know it's not talked about enough. I used to shadow my dad. So a little bit of context. I was pre-med. I went to medical school, dropped out. So I'm a med school dropout. So like take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I shadowed my dad in his sleep and cardiology clinic for 3 summers. I was his like right hand girl, like did all of his EKGs, Holter monitor setups, everything. And it was crazy how much testosterone was linked to cardiovascular issues and sleep issues, and my dad would tell me, like, "We're not in a society like Western medicine, your physicians" as someone who went to medical school for a little bit, "Your physicians are trained on how to prescribe medication to you. They're not trained to look at you as a whole person, and so you have to be your own advocate." So, if you have a coach who points that out to you and can guide you through that, and, you said yourself, you're not a, licensed, medical practitioner, but these people know sometimes more because you all seek out the information that doctors aren't taught to. And it's not to demonize physicians. Like, these were some of my best friends in the same class that I was in, and I could just see that none of our curriculum, and I didn't make through the whole thing, but none of the curriculum was about holistic health. One of my first classes was pharmaceuticals and memorizing just lists and lists of like different benzodiazepines and when they apply to certain, deficiencies. And it's so crazy. Like I thought that that almost exposure to health from the pharmaceutical side that early on in med school just kinda made me sad, and I realized that I was never gonna, I was never gonna be in a system that supported that holistic approach like I wanted it to be, even though I went to a DO school. So, anyway, that's kind of my preface here, and so, yeah, if you don't mind, what are some of the most common symptoms of low T and, like
Yeah, well, to be fair to
yeah.
doctors, it's like if you're a general practitioner or an internal medicine doctor, I mean, you have to be trained enough on so many different subjects. So they can't be endocrinologists and cardiologists and
Yes.
neurologists all at the same time. And so their job
Yes.
basically is sort of almost like to gatekeep these specialties in a sense. And yeah, obviously there's things they can treat on their own that are very common. But a lot of the times their job is to, like interpret data, like testing, like labs and things like that, and then refer to a specialist if necessary. And so, when somebody goes to a doctor and they say, "Hey, I think I might have low testosterone," some of the symptoms they might describe would be, some of the most common ones are like low sex drive, impaired recovery from training, sleep problems. The issue with low testosterone is that the symptoms are generic enough that they can be attributed to a lot of different things.
Mm,
Right? So it's one of these things where it's like, well, you just have to kind of run the gambit and look at labs and look at tests, and then that would kind of like sort of point us in the right direction. It's not
right,
like a definitive diagnosis. Is like if you have this one symptom, then you have low testosterone, because there are
right.
people who have pretty low testosterone clinically, but they have no symptoms, and then there are people whose hormone labs look fine, but they have symptoms of whatever low testosterone or whatever it is. Sometimes that's not actually the issue because human physiology is so complex. But yeah, I mean, kind of the most common ones, like I said, low sex drive, libido issues. In men, it would be like erectile dysfunction, um, low muscle mass, poor insulin sensitivity, high visceral fat. So there are a lot of things that can kind of point us in the right direction. And then again, we have to look at the labs to sort of confirm and then decide, okay, like, is this really what it is? Is this what's causing it, obviously, and then figure out like a course of action for treating it. Well, the problem with the testosterone issue is that if you go to your regular internal medicine family doctor and they just check your total testosterone level, they're looking at a reference range where your testosterone ranges from whatever, 300 to 1,000. Like that's what the range is. Well, there's a couple issues there. One is that when they're determining these reference ranges, they're surveying the lab work from, I think it's like 80-year-olds to 18-year-olds or something. So if you are, let's say, a 30-year-old man and you have a testosterone level that's at the bottom of this reference range, then to your doctor, you might look fine because you're technically within range. But statistically, you're on the very, very, very low end and you have the testosterone of an elderly man, which is not okay, right? The other issue is that every so often they are they are they redo this survey of the labs and they adjust the reference range based on the population. So
Mhm.
every year basically the average male testosterone level is falling, And so they're just adjusting this reference range down over time. I think they actually do it every 4 years. It's like the American Endocrine Society kind of determines this reference range. This would be sort of similar to like if we basically just redid what we considered obese based on how many people are obese, and like now nobody's obese anymore because it's the average.
Right.
So that's
Right.
kind of a problem. And
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
biology is so complex, you could have a testosterone level that might not be optimal, and it is relatively low, but you have no symptoms at all. And then to contrast that, you could have a level that's on the upper end and have some problems. And so because there are more hormones in play than just total testosterone, there are other labs that we have to check that your internal medicine doctor isn't going to look at. And so a lot of these guys are searching for the highest possible testosterone level, because I get guys all the time, they're like, hey, they checked my test and it's 500, but I want to be at 1,000 because that's like that's the top that you could be. I want to be at 1,000. And it's like there's not like some linear increase, or like the more you have the better you feel, because our biology is so complex. Someone might be really great at 500 and some other person might need a 1,500 testosterone level to feel great, because there's more at play than just that total level.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm really glad you talked about that. Like it is I know we're kind of like honing in on testosterone. I think it's a good example of like when a hormone can be out of whack, it can make you feel all these things, but yes, it is so multifaceted. And also those ranges, I don't remember how old they were last time I looked, but I know they tend to be outdated. I'm saying that without physical proof, but my dad used to be just really skeptical of labs for that reason because he was just like, we have to consider that not only is this like normative data, right? But it's often outdated and it's not considering like a healthy range for a particular age, like you said. So, um, gosh, you have to really be your own advocate nowadays. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, you really do. It does become
Yes.
tough, especially as a patient, because there's this kind of authoritative relationship between the physician and the patient. And so a lot
Yes.
of people aren't going to feel comfortable kind of challenging their doctor. And then a lot of
Right.
doctors also get uncomfortable when their patient challenges them. And then the dynamic is
Hmm.
the whole interaction is awkward. And so,
Yes.
like I think you do have to kind of like, the doctor tells you something. If you don't think it's true, you kind of just have to like nod your head. And then, like you said, sort of be your own advocate and,
Right.
maybe seek out some specialty care on your own sometimes.
Yes. Absolutely. I love that. I really appreciate about my coach has like a I don't know what the proper word is here, but she's tied to a clinic that can order us blood work, her clients' blood work,
Yep.
and like
Same thing
that's
I
how
do.
I incredible. Okay. Yeah. And that's how I found out I had Hashimoto's. And it was so nice to just be able to like meet with a group from that. Like I didn't have to go get a referral from, my PCP. I don't even have a PCP. I kind of just go to this clinic and like assess. I look at my own blood work and I read the most, recent literature I can find on like whatever I'm looking up and not trying to be my own doctor by any means, but just being my own advocate. And then and that's not to oh gosh, I hope I haven't spoken too poorly of physicians here. I'm just saying they're not set up to be sometimes your best advocate and sometimes your holistic, kind of viewer. So I love that you incorporate that. That's not very common. I think you said this before we started recording that there are a lot of coaches out there that got into shape and then just decided I'm going to be a coach and like guys, if you look up, like you today, listener, could go on and I'm not saying do this, right? I'm just saying you could get your coaching license today for the low price of like $300 through it and any, I don't know, you know, WABC, website that gives you your coaching license. And you could put that in your bio and you could start an Instagram and you could start posting, even though you have no experience. You could have ChatGPT write up workouts for your clients and just get a Trainerize login and go for it and start making some money if you look good. And so it's important when you're finding a coach to like look into their background, like look into testimonials. You have tons of testimonials on your page. I appreciated that about you. And um, look into their philosophy behind looking at their client as a whole, you know? So, anyway, just a little aside here.
Yeah.
If you're okay with it, I'd love to kind of talk about um, the shooter side. I think it's really interesting that you train not only SWAT personnel, but people who are competition shooters. And um, when they come to you, do they typically come and say, like, "I want to get more become, better in shape so that I can shoot better, move faster?" Like, have you had a lot of clients come to you with that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Absolutely.
and obviously there's a lot of crossover there, right? So if you get in better shape, you look better, you feel better, and then you can perform all of the activities that you want to perform better. And what's funny is a lot of the time, because my training is kind of like marketed as more performance oriented. When I first bring a client on, they'll tell me, "Well, I don't care about how I look. I just want to like be really strong and be really fast." And I always kind of have to call them out on that a little bit because obviously everybody wants to look good. I mean, that's
Right,
no doubt, right? But the other
right.
thing that you have to think about is this. So, yes, you do need to be like a good protector of your family and be prepared and be able to fight and, carry your wife out of a burning building and those sorts of things. But that's like, those situations are few and far between. But what you are doing every single day that's really affecting the outcome of your life is interacting with other humans. And so the way that you look and the way that you feel about the way that you look plays a massive role in how those interactions go. And if you compound that over all the interactions you have over the next year, that could put your life on a completely different trajectory than where it is now. And I know that firsthand because I'm a big guy now. Like I'm 6'5". I'm about 250 pounds, big, kind of imposing physique. Well, I used to be 170 pounds. So I was like a string bean. And the way that just kind of like my social interactions go now versus the way they did before is so starkly different that it has allowed me then, it's kind of opened doors to allow me to achieve things that I wouldn't have achieved before just by virtue of that. So, I always say, like, if you look like someone that takes themselves seriously, people will take you more seriously. And that's going to determine how that interaction might go, which will afford you opportunities. And as a man, especially, if you have the appearance of competence, which, just sort of like law of the jungle, like in our subconscious monkey brain, if you look like someone that is competent and takes themselves seriously, people assume that you are competent and take yourself seriously. And so they'll kind of like defer to you more, they will trust you more, which then will get your foot in the door for whatever jobs, business opportunities, friendships, relationships, regardless of your actual competency, and so that's going to affect
Yes,
like where you might end up in life.
absolutely. Yeah, that's such a gosh, that's such a wonderful point to make.
It's like
I'm, like,
so
thinking yeah, go ahead.
people talk about
Yeah.
like functional fitness and functionality. Well, what is more functional than feeling really good about the way that you look and the way that you can perform and having that confidence, and then also like commanding more respect in day-to-day interactions, right? Like, yes, the best way to protect your
Abs
family is to whatever, be able to shoot, be able to fight. Well, you know what else is really important? Being able to provide for your family and provide economic security. And that might come from doing better at your job, doing better at business. And what's going to help you do better at your job and your business is like looking like somebody who is competent and carrying your head high. So, there's really nothing more functional, in my opinion, than like looking really good. Now, obviously, they're both
yeah.
important, but a lot of the time, like the way that you look will reflect your performance. So we can train for performance and focus on, hey, let's get faster, let's get stronger, let's do more pull-ups. And by virtue of doing that, we will then also look a lot better too.
Absolutely. I completely agree, by the way. Like, I this is absolutely how my brain works and, like, I how I feel about myself. Um, I obviously work in a path, a career choice where, I do some, like, modeling gigs, like, Staccato had me in a commercial, and there's another gun brand I'm doing one for in August, and, like, I wouldn't have been chosen for that if I didn't, carry myself well and care about my body, but a lot of it is mental for me, like, when I'm on top of my routine, I'm actually following what my coach prescribes me, and I'm taking care of myself, I'm taking time out of my day that is dedicated to that, I'm not checking social media, I'm just in the gym to work, um, I'm, like, weighing my food, I'm actually, like, putting it into my Fitness Pal and, taking my supplements. I feel so much more in charge of my day, like, it gives me this kind of boost of self-efficacy, and that, like some sociological words here, but like my internal locus of control is I've truly realized my internal locus of control, my kind of perception of my ability to, be the captain of my ship and um the person controlling, the outcome and my future. And so I completely agree. This absolutely plays into that. And um I I also think to kind of to kind of go off of what you said, I think when men, I know when men look stronger and more capable, they're way less likely to be fucked with. And I think for women, it's the same. Like, I am not a small woman. I'm 165 pounds. I'm 5'10". I do not look easy to pick up. And I specifically walk around with my shoulders back to look less easy to mess with and look less like a victim and less kind of hollowed out like a lot of women are, especially because we don't have that like upper back development. um, but I've thought about this a lot in my life because I've never wanted to look easy to. I hate to say victimized because I feel like that word can kind of be taken the wrong way, but in this case, I mean like easier to pick up and easier to um, kind of intimidate and like come up to with nefarious intentions. And personally, I care very much that my man does not look easy to pick up either. Like I that matters very much to me. And um I have no shame in that at all. I want them to be able to be with my kids someday. And I want someone to look at him and think, not him, not them, especially if I can't be there and I can't be there to like be an assist or be an intimidating enough of a character. So I really like what you said. I don't know if you want to like share what you think about that, but just like, I don't think anyone would look at you and think,
Yeah,
I'm gonna rob that guy.
well, exactly right. Like the best fight is the one that you don't have to get into. And being a
Yes, yeah.
deterrent to threats is that's obviously your first line of defense. And so, and especially obviously, like, a lot of the times when I take clients on who are police officers, one of the things that they tell me is they want to have a better command presence, because it
I love
makes
that.
interactions with suspects go better. And even if you're not a cop, it's sort of the same thing. So yeah, deterring threats and just commanding more respect and yeah, I mean, just positive outcomes across the board. Like it's never going to hurt to look like somebody who's more squared away.
Absolutely. Yeah. My man would give a stranger the shirt off his back, but he's 6'3", buff and tatted. I would not he's a guy I would not wanna, I don't even wanna roll against him, you know what I mean? So and I'm a belt higher than him, so but anyway, I think that's really lovely. Have you found that those people that come in with those performance goals, maybe the ones that say like, "Psh, I don't really care how I look," have you found that because they end up looking better, do they tend to report that they appreciate that? Does that tend to come out of them?
Yeah, I would say so. Because again, like even if that's not kind of the main focus, it ends up sort of, happening on its own anyways. Because, obviously like we don't want to intentionally have excess body fat. And so even if the goal is not to, be ripped, a lot of the times like we're going to kind of get leaner just as, the process of getting faster or getting healthier. And yeah, I mean, people all the time kind of not shift their goals, but yeah, they'll be like, hey, I'm feeling really good about the way that I look, and I saw some new veins or something like that, even if that wasn't the initial goal right off the bat. But like I said, I mean, I think everybody does have that goal. I just think that people sort of see it as vain, and so they see it as something that is like not virtuous to
Mm.
prioritize, and
Ooh, there's some
because
shame there.
yeah, there is because a lot of the times when I do talk to these guys, they say, "Well, hey, you know, not to be vain, and this may sound kind of stupid, but I'd really like to have bigger shoulders." And I'm like, "It doesn't sound stupid to me." Like I think that it is is very important. It's just as important as being able to actually lift a lot of weight.
Absolutely. That's me with my coach. I'm always like, not to sound like, like that, but I do want a fat ass, like I do,
Yeah,
not like a fat one, a strong one.
sure.
But that means powerful kicks. That means like powerful bridging in jujitsu. It means like, kneeing someone in the solar plexus like way more powerfully than I could, like that's what glutes mean, but also, it's not bad.
Yeah.
But I do say that to her too. I'm like, Vicky, like not to be like that. And she's always like, it's fine. She's like, I want that too, so yeah. No, that's good to know. When it comes to just for like the shooters that listen to the podcast, because I think you are truly unique in that I haven't had I have people come on and talk about fitness and health. I truly believe in defense of self as a part of self-defense. Um, you're someone who can speak to both sides, like this competition shooter, this concealed carrier who's also very holistic in their health. How do you program training? Like, what do you recommend to maybe the competition shooter listening, or the I guess I was gonna say tactical game, so that's a totally different vibe. Let's talk about competition shooting first. Those like fast and powerful movements, maybe like staying low and staying steady. How do you approach training someone like that
Yeah,
for those
so
goals?
so I think that one of the biggest like traps that people can fall into is thinking that what they do in the gym in their training needs to have like a one-to-one port to their sport, right? So people are like, well, I'm going to have to be in this position when I'm, shooting. And so I'm going to like do exercises that simulate this. And I really think that's the wrong way to go about it because if we can just like make you stronger and make you faster, you're going to get better at all of that stuff. Because shooting in itself like is a skill, but we are expressing our fitness in that skill. So let's say that we're talking about jujitsu, for instance. If we have two jiu-jitsu athletes and they have the exact same skill level and the exact same conditioning level and all that stuff, but one of them is like 20% stronger, obviously the person who's stronger is going to win that match. We don't have to get super weird and granular about like simulating the exact sport in our general physical preparedness training. We just express that. And honestly, I think that the biggest lever that almost everybody can pull as far as getting better at any activity goes is just getting stronger because everything that you do is an expression of your maximal strength. For instance, like if I am, presenting a weapon and I have to hold this gun up for a certain period of time, if I just make my shoulders stronger, now that firearm is that much percentage less of my max ability, therefore it will become easier, right? So,
Right.
I think that that's the biggest thing is like just get stronger and then everything
Right.
else is
Yeah.
going to be better. I mean, there are people that I train that are, competitive athletes and that's kind of my focus there. It's like we don't really need to like do the exact thing you're doing. Like I have a client that I train that's in the NFL, for instance. We don't we don't do, he's a lineman, but we don't like simulate the exact starting position when he's on the line. We just make him stronger across whatever metrics and benchmarks we're using, and then it translates to that skill work. So I think that it's important to make that differentiation between those two things. But hey, just get stronger, just get faster and better conditioned, and then you're just naturally going to be better at that sport. And I made this joke the other day because I did another podcast with someone who's a jiu-jitsu practitioner. And I was joking about, these people that, they try to, simulate their sport in training. And I was like, well, if I'm training to get out of a rear naked choke, I'm not going to like put a band around my neck at the gym while I'm doing my exercises and like do some weird, it's like just get stronger because guess what?
Yeah.
Strength is a skill. And that's actually another kind of aside, but that's something that I had to realize as somebody I'm a perpetual white belt at jiu-jitsu. And when I'm rolling, when I first started training, I was like, well, I don't want to use my strength, right? Because I want to win because I did the technique correct. And there is something to be said for that in the training effect. But the other thing you have to realize is like, well, I've spent 16 years developing this skill of strength. And so I'm going to use that skill because if I can make up for deficiency in one thing, I can, like I have a deficiency with whatever technique. Well, I can make up for it with this other skill that I've developed, which is my strength. So
Absolutely.
strength is never a weakness. That's a good little quote.
I love that. That's wonderful. And how would you balance that with like the endurance that is required of jujitsu, which arguably you could just be like, well, roll more, like, like go through like sparring rounds that are longer than a minute long, But how do you maybe incorporate that for your clients?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the same thing with jujitsu or running or anything where conditioning is required. We don't necessarily have to do that sport to get better at that thing. And so, what I would kind of focus on is simulating the time domain that you're going to have to be working in. So, not to get like too technical and in the weeds, but with conditioning, there are a few different sort of like types or energy systems that your body uses. So one of them would be aerobic, which is like, obviously your distance running, your longer sustained efforts. Well, another one is called glycolytic. And your glycolytic conditioning is like your ability to repeat a high amount of effort, like multiple times, which would be kind of like jujitsu, where it's like really intense and then really slow, and then really intense and then really slow. And so for something like that, or someone who does jujitsu, we do a lot of these, what are called glycolytic intervals, which would be like your, 30-second sprints on the assault bike or something like that, or 45 seconds of sprinting and, 60 seconds of rest or something like that. Basically to build up your ability to get your heart rate super jacked up and perform, and then also have that heart rate recover really quickly. And so we can get a little bit specific with that conditioning adaptation that we're looking for.
Absolutely. No, that's incredible. I'm glad you could speak to that. And what might that, not to take all your secrets here, because I know, and
I'm
we're
an
not
I'm an
like,
open
we could
book.
never cover what you know.
No, this is fine. I
Absolutely.
love giving away info for free because I nerd out about this stuff. So
Okay, fantastic. I love that. Um, how do you balance someone who comes in and like is the jujitsu practitioner and is running? And you said earlier that you kind of would partition out the goals with the time you have and everything as you're moving closer to um a date, say like a marathon or something like that. But how do you in training split that up, maybe like across a week, for example, in order to allow them enough recovery time and things like that?
yeah, well, I'm glad you asked that because I mean the number one thing that people have an issue with when they come to me with training is that they just have a lack of time. Because most of the people that I coach are, people with families and full-time jobs, and they don't have time to be in the gym for, 2 hours, 5 days a week. Well, my whole training philosophy is all about efficiency and purpose with the training. So most people when they go to the gym, like they might have like a split, right? Where it's like, well, I do, chest on this day and back on this day and legs on this other day. Well, the nature of that essentially is that you're just kind of like spamming stuff and you're doing a lot of redundancy and there's not a whole lot of like purpose to what we're doing. But if we know, hey, this week we just have to get like 1 rep stronger on this exercise or, 10 seconds faster on this other thing that we're tracking, we can get so specific with the exercises that we are doing that we get in there and we get the thing done and we get out. So, like it's tough to give an example, but like if I'm trying to improve my bench press or something or make my chest bigger, why would I go to the gym and bench press and then dumbbell bench press and then cable fly? Because I've basically done the exact same thing 3 times, but it took me 45 minutes.
Right.
Whereas I can just kind of like pick one of those things, progress it over time, and get that thing done. And then also with my clients, because I get so, I guess, like, focused and dialed in with exactly what their body needs in each training session, I can tell sort of what's holding them back and where they're deficient and give them a very targeted, specific exercise to correct that problem. So they get in there and they get that thing done. And it's so much faster, but it's also so much more effective. And so a lot of my clients, they come to me training 5 days a week, and I end up cutting them down to 3 days a week. But it's not on purpose. It's because we just get everything done that we need to get done in, 3 1-hour sessions a week because it's so specific to them that they're not just like throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and hoping something sticks. And there's
Right.
so many parallels with fitness and shooting because it's the same thing. You could go to the
Yes.
range, you could go to the range and shoot 100 rounds and get absolutely nothing done, right? You're just mag
Right.
dumping into trash. Or you could go to the range and shoot 20 rounds with a very specific purpose, with a drill that's fixing one of your deficiencies, and get way better in that period of time than if you had just gone to the range to just, quote, shoot guns. So it's the same thing
Right.
with fitness.
I That's fantastic. I think that comparison is wonderful. I really like that. And also recovery time. My coach recently I was like she was like, "How many days a week, would you like this?" This is when we sat down and we were like, "Okay, I need to not run the half marathon. I need to, cuz shotgun dry fire, holy shibakadu. We load up our shotguns with dummy rounds. I don't think people realize that. Like in the dry fire videos I've shared with my super long shotgun, it's filled to the max with dummy rounds. and then we're like running and presenting. We're basically doing rows, like all, you know what I mean? Push and pull, like in one session. Lena and I joke that like we only need to do legs because our upper body's just like, which is not true. But um, with that said, I totally forgot where I was going from there. I got so
You
sidetracked.
were talking
Anyway,
about
this is
recovery
when
time.
yes, when my coach and I sat down, I was like, cool, yes, I'd like to lift like 6 days a week. If I'm going to be focusing on lifting, then I need to do six. And she was like, not necessarily. Let's talk about recovery. And I was like, what do you mean? What is that? So of course, when I was a coach, very much made my clients take time to recover. But what does that look like for you when you are writing these regimens with those 3 days? Is it also to provide time for their bodies to recover?
Yeah, it's definitely consideration. I think that people fall into this trap where they think more is better, right? And so I'll talk to people. They're
Right.
like, "Well, I'm only lifting 3 days a week, but I really want to lift 5 days a week." The implication being they think if they do it more, that they're going to get better, they're going to improve. But it's just like anything else, right? Like again, with the shooting analogy, or if you have a desk job, you could probably go to work for 8 hours and get nothing done versus like focusing, getting everything done in 1 hour. So yeah, it's not that more is better. It's like the more specificity is better. And so a lot of the times the recovery doesn't really become an issue. Um, However, I would say that when I'm so like data oriented and nerdy about training that everything that I do is just based on the result. So if somebody is not improving on something and the issue might be the recovery, then we're going to focus on how to recover better. So the essentially what I'm saying is that the proof is in the pudding. So, okay, are you able to complete what we needed to complete in this session? Did you get better? Did you get faster? Yes or no? If no, then we have to figure out why. Maybe recovery is a part of this. If you did, well, then we were recovered and everything's good to go. And so I'm not one of these people where it's like, hey, this is how training has to be done. These are the right exercise, or this is the number of days, you should train. I'm looking at the data of my client and seeing objectively, like, is this thing that we're doing working or not? And if it's not, then we look into things like recovery, nutrition, the training modality, whatever it is. So it's a little bit different for everybody. But I do think that, especially with the people that I take on who are a lot of like alpha male go-getter types, is they do have a tendency to want to just push harder and harder and harder until they blow the engine up. And so, some of these, yeah, so some of these people, I really have to like force them to take a step back and say, hey, like, don't go heavier than I'm telling you to go this week because it's an investment in the next weeks of training. Whereas if you just try to blow it out of the water every single day, like eventually our progress is going to stall and we're actually going to, not make as much progress as we otherwise would have.
This episode of She Shield is brought to you by Right to Bear. You've probably heard me say that self-defense is more than simply carrying a firearm. It's awareness, avoidance, and preparation for anything that is to come your way. And that's why I'm partnering with Right to Bear. They stand by defenders like you and me. You'll receive benefits like expert witness support, psychological care, gun replacement, and even protection for other lawful self-defense tools like pepper spray, knives, and even your hands and feet if you have to use them in a struggle. What sets Right to Bear apart is that they are dedicated to education and immediate legal response. In case you do ever have to protect yourself, you have access to a 24/7 attorney-answered emergency hotline so that you are never alone. What I love most, though, has to be the personal connection that Right to Bear will have with you as a member. For example, Frank, the president of Right to Bear, will give you a personal phone call when he hears about a claim being filed. That level of care in the industry is extremely rare. If you carry, train, and believe in thinking ahead to protect yourself and your family, consider getting a membership with Right to Bear. If you use my code FIT4FIA10, you will get 10% off your membership, and the link to access this and to learn more is located in the show notes of this episode, which are the notes below the title. Protecting yourself and your family should not leave you defenseless afterwards. Stay safe and stay vigilant with Right to Bear.
The most common thing that I see is people trying to lose body fat by just like drastically cutting their calories, especially their carbohydrates. And it's they're just sabotaging everything. So the most common way that people do that is they reduce their carbs, especially, but just calories overall, down to like a super, super low number. And what ends up happening is, they lose a bunch of body fat right off the start, but then because they've reduced their calories so drastically, Well, now for one, they're sort of down regulating their metabolism. So they crash their thyroid into the dirt. And now you're like a 200-pound man eating enough to sustain like a 120-pound girl, and you're not losing anything. And I see that all the time. The other issue with that then is now you also aren't fueled enough to train hard enough to progress in the gym. So now you're not even maintaining muscle mass, you're probably losing muscle mass. And so it's just an awful situation. And then obviously it's not sustainable. You have, brain fog, like your cognition is affected. So that's absolutely the number one thing that I see is just people trying to go way too hard on the diet right off the bat. And so my strategy, because I'm focused on improving the performance and then therefore the muscle mass while we're losing body fat, is that we'll just reduce those carbohydrates a little bit at a time so that, hey, we drop your carbs a little bit, you start losing some body fat, but you still have enough energy to train hard and get stronger. Well, then once the fat loss stalls, I'm just going to reduce the carbs a little bit more, but you still have enough energy to train hard. So we just keep doing that process over and over until you are as lean as you could possibly be, but also way stronger than where you started. And now we're in a great position because now we have the same, if not more, muscle mass and way less body fat. And so now, if you're a man and you just lost a bunch of fat and now you're lean and strong, now we can go in the opposite direction and just slowly grow by just kind of titrating those carbohydrates up every time that your weight gain or your gym performance stalls, so that we can just kind of keep you lean and grow you throughout the entire year versus doing these like drastic cuts and these drastic bulks where we get like super skinny and weak or we get like super fat and then we're just kind of on this hamster wheel, this back and forth all the time. So it's a much more sustainable approach. And this is why my clients are able to, add 50 pounds to a lift while losing, 30 plus pounds of fat at the same time. It's not that there's like any kind of magic to the system. It's just that we're doing things in a little bit more of like an intentional way where I'm tracking the actual result and then just making those little micro adjustments, week to week or, whatever they need to be.
Absolutely. Thank you for speaking to that. I am personally like currently struggling with eating enough, like what my coach has prescribed for me to lift as heavy as she's prescribed. And that's been my biggest issue recently. It's like stopping work long enough to actually go like heat up my food and take a moment to eat it. And I I usually just end up eating like while I'm working, but I think it's hard when you're self-employed, ironically you only eat what you kill. So it's one of those things like it's hard to take a moment, but I can attest to having to end workouts early because I just didn't eat enough. And it's a terrible feeling. It's like shit, like I'm here and I have two more sets and I feel like I'm going to pass out because this morning I skipped I skipped my pre-gym meal or like my um I don't know, like that one pre-gym snack that I usually take and I just ran out the door too fast or something. I think that's a really good point, and I struggle with that myself, so it's always a good reminder to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing we have to think about is like, okay, even if our goal is fat loss, when we are in the gym lifting weights, the goal in that moment is always to get stronger and build muscle mass because worst case scenario, then we're at least just going to maintain it, right?
Right.
So we have to fuel the training session, which is why, timing of carbohydrates specifically becomes very important. So, I don't like my clients to train fasted even if they want to lose body fat because, now their performance is going to suffer. But I think a lot of people have this mindset that they are going to have to accept getting weaker for the sake of losing body fat. But you really don't if you're doing things correctly. So,
Absolutely. What's your go-to pre-gym carb and like or in timing? What do you tend to do yourself? If you don't mind me asking. Selfishly, I want to know.
yeah, well, me personally is a little bit different. So, I have a large amount of muscle mass. I'm training super hard and I have to efficiently get enough carbohydrates in, which is my problem because I'm eating upwards of 700, like even sometimes 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day, which is like a ridiculous load. Now, when it comes to training, I have to be able to fuel the training, but also not have, a massive stomach volume of food.
Yes.
So
Delicate balance.
yeah, so if I'm in a phase where I'm like trying to grow like I am now, where those carbohydrate amounts are a lot higher, I have to get a little bit dirty with the foods. And so I'm very big on clean eating and natural foods and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But right now, my pre-training meal is Rice Krispies
Oh, nice.
and yeah, like Rice Krispies and like toast with jam, because that's the only way I'm
Nice.
going to be able to get enough carbohydrates in to fuel my training and all that kind of stuff. So, but it just
Yeah.
depends on the phase that I'm in. But
Yeah,
just a lot of
absolutely.
really fast digesting carbohydrates because I want to be fueled for the session, but I don't want to eat like this giant meat and rice meal right before I go lift super hard. So
Right. Absolutely. Maybe that's what I need to do. I've been eating the honey stingers like 20 minutes. So I have like a larger, more sustainable meal about an hour before, and then a honey stinger like as I'm getting dressed. I'll literally like have the waffle in my mouth and I'll be like putting on my leggings. So maybe I need to like load up a little bit more on that. I remember I had a coach once, I don't think it's the one I'm currently with. I tracked all my foods and she was like, "Usually I have to coach people on eating more whole foods, but in your case you eat so many whole foods." I was raised by a very like holistic cardiologist of a father. I grew up eating extremely clean, and she was like, "Have you ever tried a Rice Krispie treat?" And I was like, "No, I've seen them like in the aisles." When I was a kid, I was like, "Ah, interesting. That's what normal people eat." Um, and she's like, "You should like try one before a lift." And I became obsessed with them to the point that I can barely eat them now. I ate so many that year, and it was like during med school too. So that I like got them out of the pantry when I was studying. Like it was not just my pre-workout meal. So I or not meal, snack. Shouldn't say meal. It's not a meal. But um
yeah,
yeah, I love them so much, and I still think they're fantastic. I just tired myself out so much from them.
yeah, and a lot of times I do have to coach my clients on having to eat dirtier foods or foods that have they take up less stomach volume, especially like men who are naturally skinny and they don't have a large appetite.
Right.
Sometimes we have to get a little bit dirtier with those calories
Yeah.
to make sure that we're getting enough nutrition in. And so the strategy there is basically, hey, we'll eat as much whole food as possible,
Mhm.
and then we'll like supplement with junk food. And I even have clients, I mean,
Interesting.
especially a lot of my younger guys who have a lot of trouble gaining weight, like I'll tell them like, hey, go get a cheeseburger, like get fast food cheeseburger right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, is that the ideal thing for health? No. But right
Sure.
now, the goal is to grow. And it's like, look, we maybe make a little bit of a sacrifice, to the optimal healthful diet for a little bit
Mhm.
while we're kind of in this extreme phase. And sometimes that's just what you have to do.
Are you an In-N-Out fan?
100%.
Are you like a protein styler, or do you go for or does
No.
it depend on
Look,
okay.
I don't. A big pet peeve of mine is like these like protein cookies and protein ice cream, and it's like, look,
Yeah.
if I'm gonna eat a cookie or ice cream, I'm just gonna have a cookie or ice cream.
Totally fair.
It's like,
Yeah.
don't because look, if your problem is like you have this junk food addiction, like that's not gonna cure it, and you're just basically trying to like have your cake and eat it too, literally, and
Right,
skirt around
literally.
this issue. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, just like eat clean or whatever. And then like, it's like, if you want to have a cheat meal, then just have a freaking cheat meal. Don't try to
Yeah.
like finagle your way around it by having like protein bread. It's like, just go and eat a sandwich.
Totally fair. I'm gluten free, so I do get their burgers protein style. I like get the lettuce wrapped version, which once I
hmm
found out they had that, I like
Oh,
practically
it's great.
flew
Don't get me
there.
wrong. I love it.
Yeah, it's so good. They like it's never like a shitty piece of lettuce, which is nice. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was my boyfriend and I think he kind of introduced me to In-N-Out, or no, I'd had it a few times before that, but I'm telling you, I did not grow up eating fast food or bad food, whatever. Would you call it? You called it something dirtier food,
Yeah.
right? So like when who was it that took me there for the first time? They were like, "You haven't had protein style?" And then it became like a weekly thing. Like I had to start limiting myself because I was like, "This is so fucking good." So I love it, and now it's so good.
Yeah. I mean, I have to force myself to sometimes. And, I mean, there are people that, they're really scared of getting fat, or they're like, orthorexic, and which is basically like, when you have this kind of like obsession with eating healthy and you get really guilty feelings from eating foods that you think are, quote, dirty.
Right.
And yeah, it's good to eat healthy food and all that kind of stuff. But also it's like, look, there is a risk and reward to every single thing that you do in life. And like, yeah, you could maybe extend your lifespan by a couple years or something if you like had this like perfectly healthy lifestyle and all that kind of stuff. But like, you got to strike that balance between like,
Yes.
what's that saying? Like, I'd rather live, 30 years as a lion than 50 as a sheep or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
you got to make that risk reward determination for yourself. But I think it's
Absolutely.
it's it's not good for you to I guess just like be obsessed and limit yourself in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's good to hear. It's a good reminder. Do you believe in like 80/20, like 80% healthy, 20% not as healthy? I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So what I tell my clients is like, look, if we have a meal plan that's 100% perfect and you follow it 80% of the time, you're going to get 80% of that result. Right. And the other thing too is like, yeah, look, I'm not training people who are bodybuilders who are going to step on a stage where their livelihood is going to be determined by whether they had a piece of cake last night or not.
Right.
So yeah, like if you go out with a family or something, whatever, like just write it off. Obviously, you have to strike that balance. But what I always tell people is like, hey, yeah, stick to the meal plan and plan a cheat meal every week because if you plan it, then it doesn't feel like a failure. But if you do it because it was like a lapse in your discipline and now you feel guilty about it, you're either going to spiral out of control and just keep eating bad food because you felt like you failed, or you're going to like starve yourself the next day and do a bunch of extra cardio, and then all your hunger hormones are going to be increased, and then you're going to cheat again. So it's like sometimes I do have to coach people into like being less neurotic, which is
Absolutely.
surprising for people to hear because it's like, I'm a fitness coach, so I'm supposed to be all disciplined and perfect and stuff like that, but it's like I'm not like that.
Right. No, I think that's really lovely. I think it's good to hear and see that like kind of human vulnerable side. Yeah, I think at one point I did struggle with that coming from my dad's background, and then I started tracking everything to the point that if I didn't track something, I would be full on panicked, even though I could tell you exactly what I was eating. Like I could at some point when you track so much, if you're someone who's done this, you know. If you know, you know. You track so frequently, especially if you eat the same foods, you almost can look at your plate and be like, that's 40 grams of carbs, that's 30 grams of protein, 5 to 10 grams fat, whatever. You can kinda do that over time. I got to where even if I knew exactly what I was eating, if I didn't have a scale, if I went somewhere on vacation or I met my family somewhere, I would be in peril the whole time because I didn't have a scale. And, like, I used to take it with me on vacation and, like, not to say that's excessive, like, if you're working with a coach and you wanna do that and you're getting used to tracking, sure, but, like, looking back, I'm like, "Man, I should have spent those 3 days just kind of focusing on family." Like, there was a balance to be had. So, yeah, there are 2 sides to the spectrum for sure.
Well, it's the same thing with missing training. My clients will say,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to be out of the gym for these days. Like, what do you think I should do? Can you give me some workouts to do at the hotel? I'm like, no, just like go chill out for a few days because like you're going to come back way better recovered and you're going to be a lot stronger. And the other thing that people don't consider is like a large part of your recovery and longevity with training is like lowering your perceived stress levels. So like you're always in this like panicky sympathetic state all the time. That's not conducive to your goals either. Now your cortisol's through the roof, and now paradoxically, you're going to hold on to body fat. So, just chill out a little bit. And, that also goes into all these recovery modalities. People are all into like cold plunge and sauna and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, maybe that stuff can be good in a certain dose, but you have to remember, like, even those things are stressors.
Yeah.
And so more of those things is not better. You can ruin your recovery by doing too much cold plunge and sauna, even though it's touted as something that's good for you. Sometimes the best recovery modality is to like sit on the couch and play on your phone for an hour,
Yeah.
honestly, or read a
Yeah.
book. People are like, well, coach, should I do these compression boots and do this sauna thing and do this float tank? And I'm like, why don't you just like go watch a movie?
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
why?
yeah.
And a lot of the times that's gonna be better for you because you can't just keep adding all these stressors to your life and to your body.
Absolutely. No, that's a good reminder. I've really cold plunge was something especially when it was at its height. I feel like now it's maybe like leveled out a little bit, like you don't see it as much. I just remember when it was taking over the fitness Instagram and that was my algorithm. I was like, "Man, I should do this." And then I thought I'm someone who struggles with an autoimmune disease that's primarily from like extreme high stress in my my life that I have, not dealt with and that's manifested into like my, adrenals and my GI and everything. Like I'm having to like backtrack that now. So no, cold plunging would not be the best thing for me. That would probably make everything worse, I think, with where I'm at.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I mean, I have clients who, obviously, like guys in law enforcement, they're stressed out. They're kind of in this heightened state all the time, and they want to do cold plunge. And I'm like this is going to be counterproductive
yeah,
because one, you're lowering your core body temperature, which isn't good for your metabolic rate, and then two, like you're already stressed out, and now we're adding this artificial stressor I need you
Mhm.
more in like a parasympathetic state. I need you to chill,
Yeah.
So a lot of times, not only can it not be productive, it can be counterproductive.
Yeah.
But it's like, people, they listen to podcasts and they watch stuff and it's like, well, this guy's doing it, so I'm going to do it. And it's just like, again, right tool, right job.
Right. I love that. And that's I hope all of this, I don't think really you said this before the podcast, but you haven't said it, I don't think on air. Like every person that comes to you, you have to create a unique plan for. And I hope this episode has been a testament to that. Like whatever your goals are, where you're currently sitting at, what your framework around fitness has been. All of those things are things you would work on with a coach. Like we talked before this, I used to be I used to be a personal trainer, which is scary to think about, but um I also had very like measurable proof that I was doing well with my clients, and a lot of it was mental. Like I worked with clients who had so many preconceived notions about putting on muscle, and like um just yeah, tried to starve themselves, but then like wanted to grow a butt, kind of thing. And we had to sit and talk a lot for a lot of our training. We would talk a lot in like between sets, obviously, but in our initial consultations, I would work with them on the mental side, and then you kind of become a little bit of a life coach. And maybe whether or not you want to hear all the things, but it's a lot of that is just like how you have viewed fitness and eating calories. And I think we're constantly having to fight this like societal battle of like what is trending. And like our bodies aren't a trend, It's something I tell, like I get DMs sometimes from women asking like what my diet is, or if I'm doing a certain like fad diet out there. And I it's always like really sad to hear. And I try to tell them like, no, I actually don't eat enough. Like my coach is getting on to me. And part of that has been because it's hard to allow myself to eat enough sometimes with like what's expected of me, as a female. And like certain things like that I've had to like really work through with a professional. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this, because I hope, if anything, it's instilled some confidence in the listener to just kind of take an audit of like, how do I perceive fitness, how do I perceive eating enough to train, like what do I see as like a healthy body, and like what are some of my goals. That's really powerful.
Yeah, no, this was awesome. I love talking about this stuff. And yeah, yeah, hopefully it helps some people. So,
Absolutely. And for those listening that want to follow Randy, and maybe shoot him a message and just say, like, do you think we'd be a good fit for this? I'll have all of your information linked in the show notes, which are the notes below the title for those listening. And I'll say that in the intro. I guess by now I will have said it in the intro of this podcast. But something I like to ask my guest speakers before they go, is what would you like to leave the listeners with, if you don't mind? And also where they can find you. I always link it, but I always like to leave an opportunity to say that as well.
oh man, on the spot.
I know, right? You say all this amazing stuff in the episode, and then I'm always like, what do you want to leave them with, though? Like, what's the thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not one for like, like grand speeches or whatever. So it's
Sure.
tough. But I guess like the biggest thing is just, like find balance and, do the thing that you say you're going to do. I think that goes a long way. Especially with people nowadays, is like if you say you're going to do something, if you say you're serious about something and it's a real goal for you, whatever that thing may be, whether fitness or not, um, you just do the thing you're going to do. You say you're going to do. And, a lot of the times it comes down to just making uncomfortable decisions, because how you do one thing is how you do everything else. And that's why I think that training is so important, because if you are training and you're eating in a regimented, sort of disciplined way, that then is going to bleed over into everything else that you do in your life. And so oftentimes that can be the catalyst for improving your life in general. So yeah, I guess that's what I would leave people with, is just be serious about doing the thing that you say you're going to do. And sometimes you just have to make a decision that's hard. With going to the gym, it's like you just have to force yourself to get up off the couch and go, and you just have to make that decision one time and take that leap. And I think what holds a lot of people back is just being too scared to take that leap with whatever endeavor it may be, fitness, business, whatever it is. The thing that holds a lot of people back is being scared to take any amount of risk. So
Absolutely. I
go
love
go
that.
for your goals, man. Like, I don't
I
know. I'm
like
not
it.
I'm not a good motivational speaker.
No, that's okay. No, that was great. I was actually kind of self-auditing while you were talking, and I was like, well, I've said I'm gonna, go to the Shotgun World shoot, and I haven't dry fired today. I should really dry fire today. And like my brain went into the spiral of like all the things I've said. So that was very motivational. And no,
Cool.
I think that's actually a good point because motivation, like discipline wins out. It's the whole like it's such a, at this point
Oh
cliche. I
yeah.
feel like it's been said so much, like discipline over motivation. And like that's kind of and that's kind of how I perceived what you said. Like discipline is the day to day. It's actually showing up and doing what you say you're going to do, no matter how you feel about it in a way. So, like, maybe it's not a motivational speech. Maybe it's a discipline speech.
There you
So,
go. Perfect.
bang,
You
boom.
wrapped it up for me.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Randy. This has been an incredible conversation. I appreciate you coming on. For those listening, we'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe and stay vigilant.